The first thing they noticed was not her tears, but the way she ran, barefoot, breathless, as if something terrible was chasing her down the street. The little girl burst into the police station courtyard just as the evening call to prayer echoed faintly through the city, her small chest heaving, her arms wrapped tightly around herself like she was trying to hold her own heart together. Her face was streaked with dust and tears, and her eyes carried a fear far too heavy for someone so young. She collapsed near the front steps, shaking, pointing back toward the road she had come from, silently begging for help with everything she had left inside her. In that moment, every routine, every report, every ordinary concern stopped, because something about that child felt like a warning the world could not ignore. If you believe that kindness still matters, that compassion can change lives, and that second chances are real, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so stories like this continue to reach hearts that need them. The officers who noticed her first were used to emergencies, but this was different. There was no crime report, no loud accusation, no clear explanation. Just a child trembling so hard it looked like she might disappear if no one acted quickly. One of the officers gently wrapped a jacket around her shoulders, while another knelt nearby, watching her eyes instead of asking questions. The girl did not speak. She only clutched the fabric, nodding frantically when they gestured toward the street, then shaking her head violently when they tried to comfort her with distance. Whatever waited at the end of her fear was not something she could walk back to alone. Whatever was happening at home was breaking her in ways no child should ever have to endure. They decided to follow her immediately. The sun was sinking low, painting the sky in colors that usually meant peace, but tonight the light felt heavy, almost mournful. The girl walked ahead, small steps uneven on the rough pavement, glancing back every few seconds to make sure the officers were still there. Her hands were clenched into tiny fists, and her shoulders were tight with responsibility that did not belong to her. She led them through narrow streets where walls leaned close and shadows gathered early. The neighborhood grew quieter the farther they went, the kind of quiet that does not soothe but warns. Windows were shut, doors were closed, life felt paused, like everyone inside was holding their breath. As they walked, one officer noticed marks on her arms, faint but unmistakable, the kind left by hunger more than harm, by days without enough food, by nights without warmth. Her clothes were clean but worn thin, washed too many times, stretched too far beyond their years. This was not a child who had fallen while playing. This was a child who had learned how to survive silently. The realization tightened something deep in their chests. They had seen hardship before, but the quiet kind, the kind that hides behind closed doors, always hurt the most. The house appeared at the end of a cracked lane, smaller than the others, its paint peeling like old scars. The gate hung crooked, barely attached, swaying gently in the evening breeze. The girl stopped several steps away, her courage faltering now that the end was near. She did not go closer. She only turned, eyes wide and pleading, then pointed at the door. Her body language said everything words could not. This was the place. This was where the fear lived. This was home. One officer knocked gently at first, then louder when there was no response. The silence inside stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing a dim interior that smelled of damp walls and stale air. What they saw inside made even the most experienced among them swallow hard. The room was nearly empty. No proper furniture. No warmth. Just a thin mattress on the floor, a broken chair, and in the corner, a woman lying motionless beneath a worn blanket. The air felt heavy, like sorrow had soaked into the walls. The officers moved quickly but carefully. The woman was alive, but barely. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, her body weak from what looked like days of illness left untreated. Medical help was called immediately. As they worked, the little girl stood frozen at the doorway, watching with an expression that carried both terror and relief. She had done what she came to do. She had brought help. Whatever happened next was no longer only on her small shoulders. Neighbors slowly gathered outside, drawn by the presence of police and ambulance lights cutting through the fading day. Whispers spread, some filled with shock, others with regret. Many admitted they had heard coughing, had noticed the child alone too often, had seen signs but assumed someone else would step in. Now, faced with the truth, guilt hung thick in the air. The woman was taken away for urgent care, and the child was gently guided outside, wrapped once more in warmth and attention she had been missing for far too long. At the station later that night, the girl finally slept, curled up on a chair too big for her, exhaustion claiming her the moment she felt safe. One officer sat nearby, watching her chest rise and fall, thinking about how close the world had come to failing her completely. Paperwork was filled out, calls were made, systems moved into action, but none of it felt fast enough. Because no system could erase the fact that this child had learned fear before joy, responsibility before play, courage before comfort. In the days that followed, the story spread quietly at first, then widely. Hospital staff spoke of the woman's recovery, slow but hopeful, thanks to timely intervention. Social workers stepped in, ensuring food, care, and support. The house was cleaned. Supplies arrived. Neighbors who once stayed silent began showing up with meals, blankets, and awkward apologies. The little girl stayed temporarily with a foster family nearby, people who spoke softly, moved gently, and made sure she never slept hungry again. At first, she startled at sudden noises, flinched at raised voices, and woke up crying from dreams she could not explain. Healing, everyone learned, was not a straight line. The officers visited when they could, bringing small gifts and quiet smiles. They did not see themselves as heroes. They saw themselves as witnesses to a truth too often ignored, that sometimes the bravest act in the world is a child asking for help when adults have failed. Over time, the girl began to change. Her shoulders relaxed. Her steps grew lighter. She laughed once, unexpectedly, at something small, and the sound stunned everyone who heard it. It was like watching light return to a room that had been dark for too long. Months later, when her mother was strong enough to return home, it was not to the same place. Support followed them. Care continued. The house felt different now, filled not just with things, but with attention, with watchful kindness, with the understanding that no one should struggle unseen. The little girl held her mother's hand tightly, still protective, still aware, but no longer alone. She had learned that asking for help did not break families. It saved them. This story is not about police uniforms or emergency lights. It is about a moment when fear met courage, when silence was broken by small footsteps running toward hope. It is about the uncomfortable truth that suffering often hides in plain sight, and the powerful reminder that compassion is not optional. It is necessary. Every life touched by that evening was changed forever, not because of one dramatic rescue, but because someone finally listened. If this story has reached something deep inside you, if it has made you pause, reflect, or feel even a little more aware of the quiet struggles around you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel so more stories of humanity, courage, and compassion can continue to be told. Before this story ends, we have one special request for you. Please comment below with a single word that describes how this story made you feel, or share a thought about kindness, awareness, or helping others. Your words may inspire someone else who needs hope today. The little girl never became famous. Her name was never printed in headlines. But somewhere in the world, a child learned that her voice mattered, that her fear was worth responding to, and that even in the darkest moments, running toward help can change everything. And for everyone who heard her story, the message remains clear and heavy in the heart. Pay attention, act sooner, and never underestimate the courage it takes to ask for help, especially when it comes from the smallest among us.